Maybe I should start with you, Mr. Minister, because there were these widely reported figures last week about the numbers of young girls in particular who are HIV positive across the country, and you say that that figure is probably not correct.
It's wrong, actually. It's wrong because there was, I'm not sure exactly how it was reported that way. There's no study done about the level of HIV, the prevalence of HIV/AIDS among schoolgirls across the country. I was quoting results of a specific HIV counseling and testing done in one area which is known for its highest prevalence of HIV and AIDS. And the results is not even a study, it was just HIV counseling and testing being done in that area. But the point, Kolani, I was trying to ram home was that young schoolgirls are mostly 8 times, in terms of prevalence. In terms of being HIV positive, young schoolgirls are 8 times more than schoolboys. And it's not only in South Africa, Tolani, it's the whole sub-Saharan Africa. That study was done by UNAIDS recently. It was done in 1990. It was done again 15 years later in 2005. It shows the same trend that from the age of 14 upwards, the schoolboys and the schoolgirls split, with the schoolgirls being 8 times more positive than boys. But the figure of 28, please, can you repeat off the mind? Because last week I tried my best to try and correct it.
Okay. But having said that, then the conclusion from the fact that you say young girls are 8 times more exposed to HIV than young boys is that young girls are sleeping with older men.
Of course, that's what scientists could. That's the only conclusion scientists could make from the study. In fact, Professor Salim Karim from Caprica was saying it is one main reason why the pandemic is so deeply rooted in sub-Saharan Africa. If you look at all parts of the world, HIV/AIDS is starting to recede, but in sub-Saharan Africa, it is deeply rooted there, and they say part of the reason is exactly that type of a phenomena. And that's why KwaZulu-Natal, MEC, even launched a campaign against what they call sugar daddies, because we believe it is the elderly men who are offering money to young girls, because there's no reason why from the age of 14 they can split. If you look at the graph, which was trying to show in Morning Live on TV last week, up to the age of 14, the prevalence is the same. But from then onwards, the girls just start shooting skywards and the boys remain below. And then, round about the ages of 22, 24, the boys start rising up again. So that's a very clear statistics. But scientists have studied it very well. They say it is that phenomenon. It means it is not the schoolboys who are having sex with the schoolgirls. They are not the ones who are responsible for this high number of pregnancies in schools. It's adults out of school who are wielding money, who are wielding influence, who are wielding resources. And that's why we believe that most of the girls who are vulnerable are orphans. Because remember, from the 1990s, the orphans from HIV/AIDS are maternal orphans. We've got 1.3 million orphans. Most of them are maternal, having lost their mothers, because it's mostly women who suffer, who died from this HIV/AIDS catch more than men. So that becomes a vicious cycle which fits into itself.
Right, Minister, I thank you for the clarification. Thanks indeed. Minister of Health, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. Let me start with you, Refilwe. You spent 3 months working at a particular school. What school was this?
This was at Twatwa Secondary School in Wattville, which is in the Ekurhuleni municipality.
And dealing with
Gauteng
exactly
province.
the same issues as was spoken by the Minister?
Well, it was a teen health project focusing on grade 9, grade 10 and grade 11 learners, mainly the girls, but boys were also included. The issues that we tackled were HIV/AIDS transmission among teenagers, lowering the teen pregnancy rate, and getting the learners to be encouraged to lead a hip and healthy lifestyle and to stay focused on their studies. But there have been a number of ramifications and consequences and things that we've learned as a result of that project.
And that is exactly what I would like to know. What are these young people saying? I mean, it's well and good for us to discuss it at this level, but at their level, why is this happening?
I think firstly I'd like to touch on the issue of sugar daddies, because we've seen quite a bit of media reporting around that. Part of our module, which we did with the learners at the school, was around the issue of sugar daddies and transactional sex with older partners. And people think that this is because of people like Kanye Mbawe, and we read her biography, which was written by Leslie Mufokeng. We believe that if you can't be an example, then at least you can be a warning. And for us, she falls into the latter category because a lot of young women relate to her and how she made her money and achieved fame and success. But in the book Sugar Daddy 101 by Ladra Lawson, she says that any man can be a sugar daddy. So it's not necessarily someone who's older than you. In the case of Kanye Mbawe marrying her husband, 30 years her senior, it's not necessarily the case. The fact that someone has got the economic resources and something that makes the transactional sex appealing makes it a sugar daddy. So I can be 17 and have a 20-year-old sugar daddy, or I can be 17 and have a sugar daddy who's my own age. The bottom line is that you're not engaging in the sex because you want to have a deep, intimate, meaningful relationship. It's purely transactional. The second thing I'd like to point out is that there's also bisexual and homosexual sugar daddies and sugar mommies taking place in the communities. We often think that it's the older men preying on younger girls, but we're seeing reports of older men preying on young boys and older women preying on young boys and older women preying on young girls. Perhaps the benefit with the latter type of transactional relationship is that there isn't any pregnancy associated with it. However, the feminine secretions and the fluids that get passed on during sex still raise the HIV prevalence, even if it is woman-on-woman sugar mommy with a sugar girl.
But do they have any rationale, these kids, about why they're doing it? Is it simply about money?
Mainly it is about money. They have a number of material aspirations, and looking at the home environments and the circumstances under which these kids are growing up, it's very hard to find fault with wanting a better life. The problem is how they go about achieving that better life. They're not willing to make the sacrifice of staying in school, going to university, starting their own businesses, or getting jobs. It's easier to get someone who's going to provide all of that for you by having sex. And if you're seeing role models and your peers conducting themselves in the same way and indulging in the same behavior, it becomes harder for you to stand up against that wave.
Interesting you raise the issue of peer pressure again, because that's also another serious issue that perhaps hasn't been addressed.
The issue of peer pressure definitely hasn't been addressed. Some girls are seeing pregnancy as a rite of passage and proof of their womanhood and femininity. So they'll say, what is wrong with you? You're 15, 16, 17 years old and you haven't had a child. Are you sure you're a real woman? And these are the kind of misleading conversations that girls and young women at the community level continue to have with one another.
Lisa, there was a similar conversation taking place here in Gauteng last week. It was interesting because I think it was the MSc who couched it in a sense that people disagree about what to do with them. But why do people disagree on this thing?
I think because we get rapidly trapped into treating this as an issue of moralism and judgment and stigma, rather than trying to understand the health components associated with teenage pregnancy, the educational components, the components that deal with social norms and behavior. And I think if we spent less time trying to judge and saying, you're wrong, you're bad, and rather try to understand where this behavior was coming from, we'd be a whole lot more effective. And I think we'd be coming up with the kinds of solutions that would actually be meaningful to young women and young men. So, for instance, if you look at the research, what it's telling us is that a certain number of young women fall pregnant because they don't have accurate information about contraception. There's a perception, for instance, that if you're on Depo-Provera, for example, you take it for 3 months, then you should have a break for a couple of months to give your body a rest, and then you take it again. Obviously, that's a very quick route to pregnancy. And I think part of the reason why young women are not being well informed is some of the treatment they're receiving at health clinics. Not all nurses are particularly nice to teenage girls who are having sex. They often tend to treat them like their own daughters. They're harsh, they're scolding, they're judgmental, and they're more concerned with giving a lecture about not having sex than ensuring that you have proper information. So I think if we focused on that dimension, on creating adolescent-friendly health facilities and gave girls proper information, that would help us deal with teenage pregnancy rather than standing there and going, you're a bad, bad girl, you must stop right now.
And we're going to come to that, and I know what's going to happen. Society, people are going to call in and say, but what you do when you create those adolescent-friendly facilities, you're encouraging this to continue.
No. I mean, I think the research that has been done in other parts of the world seems to suggest that educating adolescents well, giving them good information about sex, actually delays sex. On hearing how to use contraception, your first impulse is not to rush out and go and have sex straight away. You think a little bit more. You spend a little more time on doing other things rather than wanting to rush out and have sex straight away. And I think one of the single biggest obstacles in South Africa with dealing with adolescent sexuality is this belief that if you tell children about sex, get them talking about relationships, they're going to want to rush out and have a relationship straight away. That's really not true. And I think if we can get rid of that idea, it will significantly help in how we deal with adolescents around their sexuality.
Rafilo, just your experience then in terms of access to these health facilities. What do these young people say?
The young people are saying exactly what Lisa mentioned, that the nurses are not friendly, the nurses are not always willing to engage them meaningfully, the nurses are not always sympathetic to their cases. Of course, there are some exceptions. Not all nurses will treat the girls in that manner. But the other thing that I'd like to add is that the services that are provided by the clinics, like Lisa said, are not youth-friendly. Even the times of operating of the clinics are not youth-friendly. And I remember instances in the past where we used to have school nurses who were stationed at the schools that the girls could go and talk to and consult for issues around teen health and the issues around pregnancy. That's no longer happening. The nurses are no longer at school, which means that girls are forced to sit at clinics with long queues, and some of them are disincentivized to sit and wait the whole day just to see a nursing sister.
And Dr. Pandy, perhaps a point to bring you on then, because I've heard this suggestion again just in the past couple of months, people talking about bringing back those nurses and making sure that there is that kind of facility available to these girls at school.
Yes, in fact, we are working in partnership with the Department of Health on what we call the Integrated School Health Program that is doing exactly that, bringing back health services to schools. Now, one component of that program focuses on sexual and reproductive health. Certainly, we will be offering health education in an age and developmentally appropriate manner on sexual and reproductive health. But we want to take it one step further. Given that 37% of our learners are sexually active, we want to make an actual offer of these services to learners who need it. We will do this after a consultation has taken place with the school community to decide whether it is appropriate to provide these services in the school. Now, the basket of services that will be provided include contraception and condoms, pregnancy testing, testing for STIs, and HIV counseling and testing.